Hello, and welcome to another episode on the Robin Sealark channel. Today we are going to be doing a very special From This to That, in hopes of helping you to amplify your landscapes and give you a little insight on elevating your clouds to a more professional, finessed level. Yes, if you would like to purchase this piece, it will be available at robinsealark.com. Follow me on social media and enjoy this video.
Hello everyone, and welcome to a very cool, very cash summer evening in my backyard filming this voiceover. Right now I want to show off the initial stage, what we're taking it from and working it towards, and go through some of the things happening on this. Now this is an underpainting, technically. It has the drawing on it and it has a layer of acrylic on it, but as you can see, there's a few things that look quite unfinished about it. So I want to make sure that we can go through this process together and figure out ways that you can finesse. This is the palette I'm going to be using to work on our clouds. We have a number of different colors, but I wanted to have a little bit of a variety with my blues, and I also incorporated a violet and that quinacridone magenta so that I could work with some more exciting neon sorts of hues. The big things that I wanted to think about right now generally were mixing up a number of colors, so I had a general idea of the palette that I wanted to work with. By mixing these ahead of time, it gives me some swatches and makes me be more conscientious about really mixing up those colors the way I want them to be, rather than getting into the middle of the process and trying to rush what I'm doing. I don't always mix up my colors before I get started on a painting. It's actually quite rare, but for the sake of this, I wanted to show you some of the colors that I was mentally, visually pulling out of our reference picture. The reference picture that I took is something from Pexels. I've talked about it a number of times, but it is a royalty-free imaging website. They are free for your use, and I did some editing and cropping. I wanted to work with kind of a different sort of image, dimensions and all that. So the first thing that I am trying to get done when I go on top of that initial painting is really getting a base structure of covering. So a lot of that initial layering had places where you could see the canvas board coming through the actual paint, places where you could see the drawing itself exposed. And that's kind of a more elementary or beginner thing that can be mistaken, but something you really want to make sure you do is develop a full bodied paint and are really intentional about the actual layering of paint you're getting on there. I decided to go in with oil paints. You can do acrylics to complete a process like this, but I'm really a big fan of oil paints when it comes to working specifically with things like clouds and sky, because there's a lot we have to do with the actual blending process, and it makes it go a lot more smooth and slow, and I have time to work back into the paint and really build up my layers. So here I'm just getting things really covered. I want to have much more smooth sections of color, and I want to pay attention to some of the things about the reference photo in terms of where I'm putting in my lights and shadows and coming in with different segmentations of colors. In this reference, there were lighter brights coming in on the side, and then we had a bit of shadow coming down the mid range of our composition. So I want to develop the deep colors in there and develop the highlights and make sure this has a lot of vibrancy and contrast, because that's something that was lacking in my original image, that underpainting. When you are working on more fully developed painting, you want to have bright brights, you want to have gradients that are opaque and that are aware of the textural components going on in your clouds, but you also want to make sure that like the actual viscosity of the paint is thick and so that everything is going to look really intentional. Part of the reason that I make this video and talk about bringing things from this to that is because in my personal experience, every time I've done a shift in my subject matter or I'm trying out something new or I'm a little bit unfamiliar with the territory, it's hard for me to know what I can potentially push my image to, whether that is because of limitations of my own skill or because I just kind of need an example. So I wanted to show you just some of the basic things that can be an example to you to think about as you're developing your images. Sometimes I have to go in and push things back a little, pull things forward, but it's really important that if you want a realistic image, you spend a lot of time focusing on your coloration and making sure you're developing that in a way that's true to your image, because by getting that lighting and that color accurate is how you're going to find the most expressive image of what is true to life in nature, the way that light is going to come and hit your objects, and having consistent light sources and having consistent sorts of glow to your image, specifically in this one to depicting the time of day. After I've gone a basic coat of paint and really layered things up, something I am trying to pay attention to is finessing the texture of these clouds. So it's difficult with clouds. You have to try to do a balance of a number of things depending on the type of clouds that you're working with. But here and with many other images, you're going to find that they have a combination of these hard shaped edges and then very soft edges, and then in the middle of the cloud itself you'll have more defined shadows or highlights that are going to form the different levels of the cloud, what is closest to you and further away. So as you do that, try to bring forward some of those really crisp areas, especially where you're getting fine highlights. You can see up in the right hand corner of my painting, I had a lot of structural components to that in the reference image because it had more high contrast and silver linings, the area where the sun is really directly hitting that outer edge of your cloud. So there I'm going in with really fine detail, but I don't want it to get muddy or lost in detail anywhere else in the painting. So after I really sculpted that, I wanted to gradually build up over layers and developing depths and colors to work in and get our texture more finalized. I decided to change the camera angle because when I do get closer to the end of paintings, I need my canvas a little bit closer up. I need to be able to play with it and to get some variety on how close or far away I'm looking at it. So for this, I wanted to get rid of some of the muddiness that I was sensing in more of the middle and foreground of the painting. And I also wanted to make sure I was emphasizing all of the warmth of that sunset color and glow on my clouds. I mixed up extra paint and made sure that I had some of those magenta and oranges coming in on either side of that deep crease of purple. It's something that I do on the actual cloud formations themselves and something that I had to do throughout the process to the background. But make sure that you don't have too much variety in your gradients because that's going to make it muddy. Be clear on the actual structures of the cloud that you're painting and pay attention to where shadows and highlights would naturally fall considering the form that you're painting, the structure, the masses and bulbs of that cloud. If you pay attention to having really intentional gradients, making sure you're getting good opacity with your paint so that things are not scratchy and you're not seeing any of the backboard, and if you're intentional about thinking about the shapes and forms and how shadows and highlights would play into forming their dimension, you should be pretty good on this painting, and good luck to you.
So that's how you this to that it. If one of you would like to buy this painting, it will be available at robinsealark.com. You can also check me out on the interwebs at robinsealark, Patreon included if you want to support me on a monthly kind of basis. Or subscribe and just watch videos, that would be great. I'll see you guys next week. Goodbye.